everybody. Welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday. Public health emergency. That's what President Trump says we're facing right now with the epidemic of gun violence in America. But the big question is, what is the president going to do about it? What will Republicans in Congress do about it? Will anything change after El Paso and Dayton just 2.5 weeks ago? Before leaving for Kentucky a short time ago, the President of the United States talked about his call with the NRA overnight, also seeming to back away from his promise just a few days ago to make background checks in this country the strongest we've ever seen.
People a day die from guns. Do you see that as a public health emergency?
I do. And they die for a lot of other reasons, too. But they do. And as I've said, and I think I've said it very loudly and plainly, and I don't think I've changed positions at all. We're working on background checks. There are things we can do, but we already have very serious background checks. We have strong background checks.
Jordan Phelps joins us now from the White House, our White House reporter. Jordan, he also invoked an NRA talking point this afternoon, the president talking about a slippery slope with some of these gun control measures. What is the White House actually pushing right now? Do we have any clear sense for what they want to see done?
Devin, White House officials say they are working on things behind the scenes, but no one has seen that, and it seems that Capitol Hill is a bit in the dark, too. Up there, we know that leadership is very much in a wait-and-see mode, waiting to see what kind of leadership the president puts forward on this issue, Devin, and right now, they just don't have that from the White House, so we'll have to see what they put forward. But Capitol Hill, you know, it looks like this isn't going anywhere anytime soon until the president gets behind something firm.
Okay, Jordan, thank you. A lot of advocates for stricter gun control measures trying to keep the pressure on as Congress is still 2 weeks from coming back to Washington. The president seeming to take a step back from that sense of urgency. One of those people is Mayor Greg Fisher of Louisville, Kentucky, where the president is visiting today. He joins us now live. Mayor Fisher, thanks so much for coming in. You had reached out to the White House to try to talk to the president personally about gun violence and the need to take action. They couldn't get something scheduled. But what was the message you were hoping to deliver to him today?
Well, gun safety reform is mainstream. It is not radical. What's radical is nothing's being done in Washington to get some common sense gun reform in our country right now. As we know, the overwhelming amount of Americans want some measures to be taken here. So we're hopeful that the mayors of America, 264 mayors, Republicans, Democrats, independents, have sent a letter to the U.S. Senate asking them to act on these House bills. And we know the House bills alone won't take care of the issue, but we've got to show the American people that we hear them. D.C. is behind the American people in terms of where we want to go on gun safety. So I was going to encourage the president to give the green light to U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell, the U.S. Senate Republicans to say, let's get this vote going.
Do you agree with the president today, Mayor Fisher, that this is a public health emergency? What are conditions like in Louisville right now in terms of gun violence?
It's a public health emergency all over the country, and it has been for quite some time. We focus on the mass shootings and the headlines, but when you think about the daily drumbeat of deaths caused by guns, in terms of suicides, in terms of the deaths that we see in the cities of America, imagine if as many people were dying in a shopping mall every day. The whole country would be going crazy, saying we've got to do something here. So it's a time for a leader to step up, to be a statesman or a stateswoman, to say, this is not a partisan issue. We've got to make this a human issue. We've got to make this an American issue, and something needs to be done. So I hope the president does that. I hope the U.S. Senate does that. And I hope this is just the beginning of the type of changes that we can see as a country.
Yeah, a lot of push for leadership right now. There's an absence of it in this town. Mayor Greg Fisher of Louisville, Kentucky, a great city there. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on. Well, as the mayor just said, gun violence is much more than mass shootings. It's an epidemic in many cities across the country, including right here in Washington, D.C. The toll has been just as horrific as what we saw in El Paso and Dayton. Our Serena Marshall caught up with a high school football coach here in the nation's capital who told us that his 2001 football team only has 5 players remaining, 5 players living, all of the others killed by gun violence. A stunning figure. And he told Serena Marshall that he worries about his 2019 team and what's in store for them.
Football and funerals, 2 words that shouldn't be synonymous, but for Coach Steve Sanders are.
So many funerals, so many young people just getting killed for no reason, senseless death.
For more than 30 years, he's volunteered his time coaching, drilling, and mentoring young boys in Southeast D.C.
Go, show them how fast you is, big boy. Let's go, big boy. Let's go, Big Zay.
An area plagued by violence and guns.
Like, what is going on? You know, why are 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds carrying guns?
For many of those years, funerals have become an all too familiar part of the game. 18 years ago, his team, the Woodland Tigers, had 19 players. Only 9 made it to adulthood. One of them, Adam Madden, remembers those years.
It hurt so bad to see like close friends that you grew up with, and it was like, what? They're so young, and they was dying so young.
Coach Steve, fearful his current team faces the same future. His assistant coach gunned down in a drive-by, the motive unclear. And coming just days after Tigers defensive end Karan Brown shot over a dispute from selling cookies and water. He was only 11.
You know, I ain't never seen a bunch of grown men call me crying.
For the parents, it's the field that provides cover from that violence.
While they're on the field, I know they're safe. I know somebody always watching them.
The coach, like so many Americans, wanting the politicians located just across the bridge to make changes.
Yeah, I'm angry. I'm frustrated about America and the leaders. It's something gotta be done.
Until they do, he hopes this team can help guide them out.
What gives you the strength to keep doing it year after year?
I think that's my calling. Thank God that favored me to do a job.
A sentiment echoed even 18 years later.
But that team right there showed me so much, and it made me care about life so much. They kind of showed me a way of being successful and still find a way out.
Coach Sanders said one way he believes the gun problem can be solved is by investing in the communities. Programs like his, when fully funded, isn't just providing coaching. It also offers tutoring and field trips. Devin?
All right, our thanks to you, Serena Marshall, for that. So many high school students and young graduates also stepping up on this front to keep the pressure going. I'm joined by 2 of them now, both members of the March for Our Lives movement, both 2019 high school graduates, college bound. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much. Bria Smith, Tia Roberts,
Thank you for having
Wisconsin
us.
native and a Florida native. Great to see you both. So you guys are a part of this organization so many of us have heard about since the massacre at Parkland High School over a year ago. And today you're launching a new campaign. It's called A Peace Plan for a Safer America.
Yes.
And what strikes me about it is so bold, so ambitious. Yeah. It's a pretty big deal. Almost, I would liken it to the Green New Deal on climate. This is sort of that scale on guns. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, with our peace plan, we're not only trying to push the needle, but change the narrative and the way that we talk about gun violence prevention. As is always mentioned, you know, we always talk about mass shootings. It's what's always on our minds, at the forefront of our minds, but really that's not the majority of the gun violence that's happening in America. Everyday shootings and suicides are the majority. And so with our peace plan, what we've tried to do is really bring an intersectional approach to this conversation and set audacious goals that politicians are going to have to step up and take the initiative to work on if they want to be taken seriously.
So what's audacious when it comes to gun control? What does that mean? What do you have in here?
So we have universal background checks, so just holding our politicians accountable for getting money from NRA. So just coming into understanding the peace plan and having an intersection, you talk about audacious goals, and if it's something that we can't do, then we need to see a goal from someone else. And with the intersections, I think it's important that we have the peace plan, because not only does it talks about like mass shootings or suicides, but also inner cities, and how before we saw the clip of these inner city people going through everyday shootings but not having a platform to speak about it. And with the peace plan, we fund these inner cities and we fund these organizations to give them something to go about.
You're really hoping that this is a blueprint for a lot of the political candidates, mayors, to seize upon different pieces of it, but also to mobilize people your age who will vote for the first time in a presidential election in 2020.
So as one of the policy points, we have automatic registry for voting when you turn 18, because you see in America, we don't tell young people that you have have the vote to, like, you have the right to vote. You have the power to contribute to our society and vote for representatives who actually elect you, or elect for representatives who represent you. I think it's interesting because we want to have these young people in civic education and being part of voting and understand that our power can make a difference for electing people who actually represent us.
Well, what keeps you going? I mean, there are so many reasons to be discouraged. We heard from some gun advocates today, gun control advocates, when they heard the president take a big step back, seemingly, on background checks. Seems like a familiar pattern. We've been here so many times before, but what sustains you guys? What gives you guys energy?
Yeah, the gun lobby wants us to be discouraged.
For sure.
The gun lobby profits off of other people's inaction and feeling like they can't mobilize for something that will save lives. And so what keeps me going every day is just knowing that I am truly taking down the evil in this society and the people who are not listening to the hundreds of thousands of people each year who are being shot and killed and having no justice. And one of the things we outline in this plan is that if all of our policies are implemented, we expect that over a 10-year period, the gun deaths will decrease by 50%.
That'd be a really big deal, and we know you're going to be out there pushing the whole way. Tia Roberts, Stanford bound. Great to see you. Thanks for coming in. Bria Smith, Emerson College bound. Thank you so much to you both for coming in. Great to see you and have you here in the briefing room.
Thank you.
Well, turning now to another story we broke here on ABC News yesterday, the Trump administration's new policy when it comes to housing and detaining young children migrants. The policy that's been governing that practice here in the United States has been something known as the Flores Agreement since 1997, capping the number of days that children can be detained at 20. But a short time ago, the White House announcing they're taking steps not to roll that back. And our Ann Flaherty is here. She's our senior reporter on this story who's been breaking this ground. And a very controversial step that this administration has been looking at for some time. Tell us what it actually means. What are they doing by looking to go around the Flores Agreement?
Well, this is something, Devin, that Trump has been looking at for a very long time. There is this court settlement. It's named after a girl named Jenny Flores who came across the border and was detained by U.S. authorities. And lawyers had filed suit on her behalf saying that she was mistreated. The court agreed to work with the federal government to set standards. It's sanitary and safe conditions, and you can't detain the children for longer than 20 days. In 2015, Obama went to a judge and tried to say, well, can we have them detained if they're with their families? And the judge said no. Trump wants a way around this. He has proposed lifting that cap, and he thinks he has found a way to do it within the law.
So why does the Trump administration, Ann, want to detain children for longer than 20 days? You would think that these migrants wouldn't be a particularly urgent threat in terms of safety and security. Perhaps they're unwanted. Perhaps they're here illegitimately. But right now they're being, after 20 days, housed in HHS facilities, given to foster parents temporarily as the proceedings go on.
Well, and those
What's
are the kids. Those are the kids that are arriving alone or when they're with extended relatives who are not a legal guardian. They're not a parent. Maybe it's an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent. Those are considered unaccompanied minors, and they go into a separate system. What we're talking about here are people who are arriving with their families. And what Trump has said is that we have this system that encourages people who want to come to the United States to bring children with them, because they know that if they travel alone, they will be put into an ICE detention facility until their case can be processed. This is very different. If you travel with a child, the Flores Agreement says that you can't detain them for longer than 20 days. So conservatives have always seen this as an encouraging unfairly people to come and to bring their children with them.
And getting a lot of blowback today from civil liberties organizations. The ACLU has called this, quote, a cruel attack on children. Although we should say that the administration is trying to counter this narrative by putting out some video. I think we have it from inside what these detention facilities. They're trying to paint a picture that they'll be much more luxurious, shall we say, than a prison. Here's some of this. Is handout video. They won't let independent media inside these facilities, but here you get a glimpse of what they say are conditions at these detention centers don't actually look that bad from this point of view.
Right. These are not bad jail-like facilities, but it is detention, and health experts have said that detention adversely impacts children's health, and they do not advise it.
And so the Trump administration making some big news, looking to extend now the detention of children and their families for more than 20 days. Ann Flaherty, thank you so much. We are joined now shortly, I believe, by the president of the Migration Policy Institute, Andrew Selle, who is someone who has been covering this policy change in the Trump administration for quite some time. Andrew Selle is just joining us right now, I believe, sitting down here in the ABC Bureau. While we wait for him to get plugged in, let's take a listen to the president's announcement on this as well.
I am the one that kept the families together. Okay? You remember that, right? Just remember I said it. And now it gets even better. President Obama and others brought the families apart. But I'm the one that kept the families together. With what we're doing now, we'll do even more of that, but it'll make it almost impossible for people to come into our country illegally. Plus, we're building large sections of the wall. I won the lawsuit 2 weeks ago in the Supreme Court. We're building large sections of wall, and lots of other things are happening.
All right, and we don't have Andrew Selle, but we did hear from the president there on this new policy change with respect to detaining children. The administration, like we said, going to face some legal challenges on that front as well. Turning now to another controversy stirred up at the White House, immigration not the only flashpoint today. The president also doubling down on a divisive new political attack on Jewish Democrats. Here's what the president said just a short time ago.
In my opinion, you vote for a Democrat, you're being very disloyal to Jewish people, and you're being very disloyal to Israel.
4 out of 5 American Jews voted Democrat in last year's midterm elections. They generally vote Democrat, that is. The Anti-Defamation League and other Jewish groups have blasted the president's comments as anti-Semitic. He pushed back against that today. But for more of a perspective on the president's politicization of Jewish voters in this country, we're joined by David Harris. He's the CEO of the American Jewish Committee. It's one of the largest and oldest Jewish advocacy groups in this country. David, thank you so much for joining us from New York. We should also say it's a nonpartisan organization, which has been part of your message. You know, you've led the group since 1990, if I'm correct. What did you make of these comments from the president when you heard them?
Devin, they were extremely, extremely troubling. By talking about issues of loyalty and disloyalty, the president, whether he knows it or not, is evoking very toxic themes and reopening a very dark history where Jews were often accused of being disloyal to the country where they lived. We Jews who live in the United States are blessed. We're American citizens, and our loyalty is to this country. The president should know that.
What do you think he's trying to do here, David? Do you have a sense of why this push is being made, really, to try to divide American Jews?
Well, it's hard to get into the president's mind, of course, but this is going to be a very close election, and it's going to be a very heated election. And I suspect we're going to be seeing a lot more of these kinds of appeals, both with respect to Jews and other communities. The president believes that he's got a great record on Israel, and in many respects, many believe he does have a great record on Israel. He's trying to paint the Democratic Party as the faces of Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, when in fact the Democratic Party is much bigger than the two of them. But he sees an opening here, and he's trying to drive a truck through that opening. My guess is looking at states like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where there's going to be a lot of focus in the next election.
Will comments like the president made, David, today, suggesting that a support of Democrats, support of people like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, who have faced their own criticism for anti-Semitic language and statements, does that draw votes to him? I mean, I'm not asking you to speak for all Jewish voters, I suppose, but I mean, I find it hard to put my mind around how anyone who has been supporting Democrats for years would simply hearing the president suddenly change their mind.
Well, according to our American Jewish Committee polls over many, many years, Devin, roughly 75% of American Jews in a typical presidential election will vote Democratic. The number has dipped. It's risen depending on the election, and roughly 25% will vote Republican. I don't see the president's comments now as driving many people away from their existing camp. Obviously, we need to know who the Democratic Party candidate is. That may or may not affect voting behavior. But all things being equal, my guess is this will reinforce the president's base, but it will not change the minds of many on the other side, who, by the way, may have their own qualms about the Democratic Party, but not enough to jump ship quite yet.
Have you had any communication at all with the White House, David Harris? Are you looking to reach out to them on some of the things you've heard coming from the president?
Devin, as you said at the outset, we're a nonpartisan organization, so our goal here is not to politicize the issue or to weaponize it in the context of the election, quite the contrary. So we have tried to explain to the White House why this is a toxic message, why this is the wrong way to go. If the president wants to run on his record in U.S.-Israel relations, all power to him. He has every right to do so. But to try and divide American Jews, question their loyalty, suggest that those who don't vote for him are somehow ignorant or disloyal, I think is making an even a country that's already deeply divided and polarized even more so. It's very unpresidential. We hope the president will stop.
David Harris, the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, someone that former Israeli President Shimon Peres called the foreign minister of the Jewish people, highly respected. Appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Devin.
Well, finally today, it's been nearly a year since the death of Senator John McCain, a lion of the Senate, an advocate for bipartisan incivility in our politics. And today, ahead of the one-year anniversary on Sunday, his family and wife, Cindy McCain, are launching a new initiative to promote more acts of civility in our politics. Our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, traveled to Arizona and met with Cindy McCain, who told us about the legacy of her husband and what he would have to say about some of the political rhetoric going on today.
What would Senator McCain be talking to me about right now? What would be driving him right now?
Lots of things. I mean, you know, certainly the shootings that have been going on, certainly the incivility that's happening. I think the treatment. You know, John was always the guy fighting for the little guy, and I think John would be very discouraged about the border situation right now with our immigrants and our quote refugees coming across the border now, and their treatment. I know he'd be very upset by that. And I think generally, and of course he would also be the voice of reason in all of this, which is what we're sorely lacking right now, is his voice of reason.
I mean, there's two ways it can go. It can swing back and move towards civility like you're talking about, or it can be a reaction in the opposite direction.
Right.
That,
yeah.
You know, it's kind of more incivility, hitting back and counterpunching, as the president likes to say.
I hope not, because I have to believe that some of these shootings, although aside from the gun laws, and that's not something I want to get into, but these shootings are a response to this incivility and are a response to things that are occurring around them. And so all of this has to be taken into consideration in our country. I mean, our country is not well right now. We're not, you know, we need to get our act together, number one, and step back and take a breath. You know, this country's made up of immigrants. We're made up of people of every color, every creed, and that's what makes us special. And to somehow side up black and white or brown and white or whatever it may be is just wrong. It's not who we are.
And Cindy McCain, the wife of the late Senator John McCain, speaking with our Jonathan Karl. Much more from that interview coming up on Sunday this week with George Stephanopoulos. Be sure to tune into that. Plus, Cindy McCain talks about why she thinks there's no one in the Republican Party right now carrying the torch of her husband's legacy in the Senate. It's a great interview. We thank you very much for joining us here on ABC News Live in the briefing room today. We're here every day, 3:30 Eastern Time. You can follow the latest on all the stories we've talked about today on the ABC News app. Download it. You can watch our live coverage there as well very easily. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you back here tomorrow.